Yeah,
All right,
not a
we are now
problem.
recording. Go ahead when you're ready.
All right, so hi everybody. My name's Erica. I used to be a former vice president and then president of the club back when it was known as the Business Law Club, and then I think we changed the name to Undergraduate Law Association. Quick shout out, love the new logo, by the way, if it's what was up on the PowerPoint screen. Yeah, excellent design work there. So there's a lot of stuff I could talk about today because you guys probably have to go through LSAT, law school applications, law school itself, looking for jobs, taking the bar exam, and then your actual practice. So you guys are kind of at a early milestone in what's really a marathon if you do want to go through with this. So to get a better sense of the spread of the group, I think I can see most, if not all of you. How many of you are juniors and seniors? Okay, and then are there, how many of you are sophomores, just by a show of hands? Okay, any freshmen? All right, okay. So maybe it would be helpful for me to ask what you guys would like to hear about, because I'd be happy to run you through my whole journey. But I think maybe it'd be helpful to find out what you want to focus on, whether that's what law school is going to be like, or whether it's what your actual career is going to be like, or a mix of both. What would be helpful for the group, Sebastian, or feel free to shout it out, someone in the crowd.
Anyone who feels like they want to hear some. DJ, what's up?
She works in a big type law firm, right?
Yeah, Erica, he's asking if you work in a big law firm down in Hawaii.
Yes, I do.
Can you describe the culture of what it's like to work in big law in Hawaii?
Absolutely. Okay, so big law is, as you guys move in this journey, is a phrase you're going to hear for the rest of your lives. So briefly, I'll just say, so there's big law, mid-sized, and then your small and solo practitioners. To the culture of big law, you guys are going to hear a lot of horror stories, but I will say that the culture you experience is going to be very uniquely based on your actual firm itself. So it's more kind of at that granular level than just say big law or mid-size law. To that point, one of the reasons I ended up moving to Hawaii to practice law is because a big law firm here in actual size of attorneys is more like a mainland mid-size firm. So what's interesting is I get a mix of, day one when I got here being thrown into, you're going to be writing motions and drafting oppositions and arguing in court as soon as you're comfortable getting in there. Whereas I've talked to friends who have, gone to big law firms in Chicago, Seattle, California, and their experience can be a little bit different. So, I've had classmates who ended up at, say, an international firm, and their salary is phenomenal. But rather than that kind of hit the ground running day one experience, they're treated much more like a traditional big law first year associate, which can kind of involve doing people's grunt work or the kind of spillover assignments that people don't want to do. I had asked a friend what his first assignment was in a Chicago big law firm, and it was reviewing hundreds, if not thousands, of documents in advance of an arbitration. So it really does depend on the firm you end up with. But I would just caution you that with mainland big law, the trade-off can be you're going to have a much higher quality of material life, and you might pay off your student loans faster, but you really need to look at the type of work that the firm is going to offer you.
All right, fair enough. All right, so I think we'll just do questions because we only have so much time with this one. So any other questions, anything you want to hear about? DJ again.
When you were starting clubs in law school, did you find it difficult to do that and manage a schedule like studying for law school itself?
Okay, so that's a great question, and the answer is going to take me all over the place for my law school experience. So with clubs in law school, there's going to be a kind of hierarchy or kind of different grouping of student organizations. There will be your kind of special interest group advocacy organizations, you know, Hispanic law students, Black law students, Federalist Society, the American Constitutional Society. But there will also be, as I'm sure you guys have come to be familiar with, you know, moot court and law review. Depending on which organization you're involved with, there can be really big time sinks. So for me, what a lot of people will tell you is that moot court and/or law review are the must-do things you have to do in law school. And they do look good on a resume to an extent. But if there are other things that you're inclined to contribute to your law school community, I encourage you guys to go out and do them. I think I had a bit of a unique experience because in my case, I was starting an organization at law school with the goal of turning it into an actual clinical program that was approved by the faculty and part of the curriculum. And so I felt very comfortable sacrificing academics to get that done. But I think it's essentially when you go in, your first year is gonna overwhelm you with the amount of reading and the weird way that law school handles grading. But you're gonna have a chance to sort of feel out what path you wanna carve. And you're gonna feel very pulled towards moot court and law review because those are the things to do. And if you end up doing those, it could be up to about a 10 to 20 hour a week time sink on top of the reading that you're doing. So really your first year of law school is trying to figure out how to create a system that works for you where you can do your academics, do the extracurriculars you want to do or add to your resume and not go absolutely insane. So it's definitely a balancing act and there's always going to be some kind of sacrifice there. But in the legal field and in law, there's always a workaround, right? So if let's say you're very involved in starting a project at law school, if your grades take a hit, you make up for it with networking. Most of the jobs you're going to be trying to find anyway are based on whether you get the offer or not can often be based on what's called the airport test. And so a lot of what you'll find is that, you know, everybody who graduates law school, all of your classmates, most of them, if not all, will be able to do the job of being a lawyer, and firms know that. So a lot of what they're looking for is the airport test, which is more of a sense of, could I be on an hours-long extended layover at an airport with this person? As like a real live example of that, the elections you guys just did, you know, think about whether when you were voting, did you really pull out the objective pros and cons you heard from the speeches, or did you kind of synthesize that through just your general vibe of the person? So that's how you're going to land a job down the road, and whether you're in law or not, for that matter. And so I encourage you when you get towards your first years of law school to spend the first year not feeling like you should have anything figured out, but to try and develop a system and refine it through your next 2 years.
For sure.
To that point, I think it might be helpful to tell you guys, so as you get towards law school, you'll meet people who have it figured out. Your newly elected vice president, I'm sorry, I was very enamored by your presentation, so I'm going to call you out specifically. People in her position, extremely enviable. Having, when you're a functional junior, an idea of 3 areas of law you might like to go into, absolutely amazing. If you're not there and you don't feel like you're going to get there as you're close to law school or even in it, that is absolutely okay. What you should be focusing on in law school, because for the most part, they are not going to teach you how to do your actual job. They're going to teach you how to think about your job. So your goals in law school are really to figure out how to make this profession work for you. Your goal before getting to law school is to figure out if you actually even want to be a lawyer. For that, I encourage you to solicit as much advice as you can and talk to people who are actually lawyers to figure out what their day-to-day is like. But your job in law school is to figure out how to make this profession work for you. And that involves first figuring out what part of this job you would actually really enjoy. So for me, I love nitpicking about the meaning of one word. And so I love fighting about contracts. I do a lot of contract litigation. You get the same thing when you're trying to interpret statutory law. So you want to find out what part of the job is actually the most interesting to you. Is it arguing in court? Is it helping clients negotiate deals? Is it building kind of transactions? And then from there, once you know what you want to do or what you like about the job, figure out where you want to do it. And those are going to be your target markets where you should network with firms and figure out where you would like to practice, for the first couple years, if not forever. And then finally, to figure out with who you want to practice. And that's when you're in interviews with firms to try and get a sense of what that day one on the job is going to look like and what the actual expectations are. So really, like, as you're entering this profession, and I hate to wax poetic about it, but as if you do think of it as a higher vocation, it's your profession to carve your reputation in. And so you want to make sure you've found a niche that you enjoy in a location you enjoy with people you like working with, because those are the people you're sometimes going to spend until midnight in the office with, whether you're on litigation or transactional side.
So Erica, you said one thing we might want to ask lawyers is about their day-to-day job experience. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what do you do day-to-day? What was your day like today, yesterday, et cetera?
Yeah, so today, so for me, so I work on the litigation side, so it's more adversarial than what transactional lawyers do, which tends to be more like building contracts, closing real estate deals, things like that. So for me today, before I got on this call with you guys, I wrote a counter offer to a settlement offer we had received from another party. And that's in a dispute between a brother and sister over who should get what percent of a house after their father died. So, just a straight family dispute about title to property. But I was writing a letter where we're trying to, settle on a number. And there's a lot that goes into that that's really thinking about how to persuasively lay out the offer and to convince the other side to be reasonable if you think they're being unreasonable, or what's really going to motivate the other side's client to resolve the case. After that, there's also a lot of back and forth emails with opposing counsel in another case where we are fighting about whether he should pay my client fees for bringing a motion to dismiss a frivolous claim that he filed. And so there's been a lot of back and forth about that. Then we have a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, something that's called a meeting of creditors tomorrow. And so today was doing a lot of detective work, digging into this debtor's kind of history and figuring out how to protect my client's interests as he goes through that bankruptcy. So what's great about the job is if you're good with being pulled in different directions, litigation can be a really good fit for you. A lot of it today, as you can probably guess from the theme, was sort of developing persuasive writing assignments, more or less, finding ways to make reasonable threats to the other side that aren't threatening enough to get you sanctioned, but get your point across. I've also worked on really interesting cases since I've gotten here. So, one of my favorites was does anybody know who, just show of hands, Sailor Jerry, the tattoo artist is, or Ed Hardy, that style of tattooing? Okay, so there's a very classic style of American tattooing. It's probably the original American tattooing. So anytime you see those old school naval tattoos, the stars, the ships, the birds, the swallows, those were all developed by Sailor Jerry. and his heirs of his estate live here in Hawaii. And now one of the things that you have a right to as an individual is to how companies use your pictures. So I can't take a screenshot of the room that I see right now and then use it to advertise my product without getting your picture. Pretty standard idea that I think we're all familiar with. And so the heirs of this famous tattoo artist were saying that a Scottish rum distillery had stolen this tattoo artist's identity when producing Sailor Jerry rum. And so that turned into a battle over who owned the intellectual property of this tattoo art that had gone into the public domain. And on top of that, it appeared that his widow had actually sold the business and the trademarks to the predecessors of the Scottish distillery. And so it became this 2-year-long fight about who owned the rights to this tattoo artist's image and all of his artwork. And that was going on the day I entered my firm, and they literally brought me in and said, "We've got a perfect case for you." And in that, some of the fun things I got to do were they had filed one type of claim that they filed is called unfair methods of competition, which is something you typically see in antitrust litigation, which would be like when there is a monopoly that a company has on an industry. So really doesn't fit what I described about using this tattoo artist's likeness and artwork, right? So I got to work on a motion to dismiss that claim. And rather than letting that motion go to court, basically as soon as the other side read it, they immediately voluntarily dismissed their claim. So that was like a cool feeling to be like, oh, we don't even have to hear the motion. You just agree. You're terribly wrong. And then the other thing that was awesome about this case was, so like I said, you have a right to your likeness, as well as a few other things. But a lot of states have started enshrining that right in their actual statutes. And so Hawaii did that, and that was one of the statutes that they were suing us under. Now, how I said I love nitpicking about the meaning of a word or reading a statute and trying to figure out what a bunch of congressmen who didn't agree with each other were trying to get across for a court to interpret, is that when you create a statute or a law and you want it to run backwards, so you want the statute you're enacting now to have an effect over things that happen in the past. You have to specifically say that because that's typically not how things work. Typically when you enact a law, it only applies going forward. So without those magic words of this goes backwards, the statute is presumed to work the regular way, forward operation only. And this tattoo artist died in 1973, and the law in Hawaii wasn't passed until 2009. And that law did not have the magic backwards operation language. So we filed a motion based on that, which ended up getting turned into a published opinion by the Hawaii District Court that without the magic language, the statute does not operate backwards and does not cover this tattoo artist. And the cool practical effect of that was that ruling ended up getting the Hawaii legislature to revise the statute to include the magic language, because apparently they actually did want it to operate backwards. They just failed to put that language in. So it was neat to have a motion that I worked on in my first year of practice actually lead to a substantive change in state law.
That's awesome. All right, so we're at 7. So one more question and then we'll head out of here.
Working in litigation, how often would you say you go to court then?
I could not quite hear that. Could you repeat that?
Oh, when you work in litigation, right? So do you go to court often? Like how often would you say you go to court?
So litigators go to court about as often as the tier of law firm they are in. So if you're a small firm or mid-size, you're going to go to court a lot. If you are in a big law firm, your opportunities to go to court until you have made partner are going to be much slimmer. I go to court at this point. I've just entered my third year, several times a month. It's been really interesting. I think the pandemic was almost a little helpful in that because, you know, everything's video hearings now. People are handling things privately in their office. And so I think that helped give associates, or at least someone in my position, a little bit more leash to appear in court more. But yeah, I'd say I am making some kind of statement, representation, or argument before a judge multiple times a month. And then on top of that, you also have conducting depositions of witnesses, which is almost like having them on the stand for direct testimony, but you get 7 hours with them in your office to ask them questions, defending depositions when it's your client going through that process. And then there's also a lot of, like, you're gonna hear this a lot as you guys seek advice from everybody who might have it, is a lot of stuff does not go to trial anymore. And that can be very true. And depending on your target market, they're going to have like a type of case that often goes to trial. Here, it's medical malpractice, and almost every other type of law or type of legal action will settle before it ever gets to trial. And really what trial is like this big game of chicken where it's the two clients and the attorneys on both sides basically driving their cars straight at each other and figuring out who doesn't want to go to trial the most. And the main thing there is not so much about the strength of your case as that trial is extraordinarily expensive. It will cost your client $50,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. And so because your job is to actually look out for the best interest of your client, oftentimes you are depriving yourself of opportunities to do really fun things in court to help your client save money, which is rewarding in its own way. But you do miss out on times where, say, there's just a witness who's such a liar on the other side, and you can't wait to cross-examine them on the stand. And then that never ends up happening because you settled, but hey, you got a good outcome for your client.
All right, awesome. So I guess we'll go ahead and cap it there. So round of applause for our speaker, everyone.
Yep, and then Sebastian, I'll say, give people my email address, guys, no pressure, whether you reach out or not, but like, as a pet project, I'm happy to look and comment on the strength of resumes and phrasing, as well as personal statements. I know personal statements are the most insanely awkward, uncomfortable thing that you have to do. It is so horrible to try and describe how awesome you are in 2 pages and feel good about it. So happy to read through any personal statements, let you know the kind of general sense I get from you. I'm very close with my law school admissions director, and so I have a sense from stories from him about like how to not look really arrogant or ridiculous or any of the bad adjectives we could come up with for what impressions you could leave with a personal statement. So Sebastian will give you my email address. Feel free to hit me up. Also, if you have any questions, want to set up another chat, happy to do it. I heard all the advice before I went into law school, and I'm happy to share what I've distilled.
All right, awesome. I'll give them your email. She's very helpful. I asked her a few questions back a few months ago, and so she was very accommodating, and I appreciated it. All right. So speaking of which, I posted my personal statement up on the group chat. Did anyone see it? Okay. See, mine was terrible. Don't go based off of it, but it just gives you a general idea.